We were we were talking about how we came up with the name Fire and Ice. Which one do you think is fire and which one do you think is ice?
Recognize those two, Jamie Salé and Theo Fleury, a couple of mainstays of sport in this country, and Canada's sweetheart in Jamie Salé, and certainly we've all followed the journey of Theo Fleury as a Calgary Flame through all of his struggles. And both people I have interviewed in the past, and I feel they're unrecognizable now.
Well, so many people were talking this week about this Toronto Star article that was looking at what has happened to Jamie Salé. I mean, she went from being this Olympic champion and everybody loved her, Canada's sweetheart, into this conspiracy theorist teamed up with Theo Fleury, who I think is almost down the rabbit hole further than she is, talking about how everything is corrupt. The government is corrupt and only they are smart enough to know how to connect the dots. The rest of us are sheeple and we don't get it. And they're just, they're just so much more enlightened than we are.
IQ even. Higher IQ according to Theo Fleury. Look at this.
Yeah, this is a tweet that Theo retweeted, basically saying that conspiracy theorists are actually a lot smarter than the rest of us, that they have this ability to kind of put together the pieces before the rest of us can see it.
Spatially, numerically. Let's bring in somebody who definitely has a higher IQ than those two and us all put together, right? We have a professor of law, health law, in fact, at the University of Alberta, Professor Timothy Caulfield joins us on the line. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys.
I wanted you to start by trying to kind of peel back the onion of what is going on in particular with Jamie Salé.
Yeah, it's incredible, to be honest with you. And I think it's important to start right from the top that this is hardcore conspiracy stuff we're talking about. The kind of information that she's pushing out on her platforms is really fringe stuff. This isn't debating how much immunity you get from the boosters or even debating the complexity of mask science. This is hardcore conspiracy stuff, and a lot of it is really harmful. And I think both Fleury and her are really good examples of what happens when you start living in an echo chamber, right? When you start living in this world where conspiracies become your community, they become your friends, they become your support system, and you just keep digging. It becomes very, very difficult to climb out. And to be honest with you, especially with Jamie Salé, there's a sadness there to it. To see someone fall this far down the hole.
I often think of her friends, of her family, how difficult it must be. Everybody, I think, now knows someone who has leaned into the fear of this. But with Jamie in particular, I remember pictures of her and her husband at the time, now split, her and Craig Simpson, former Edmonton Oiler, now hockey analyst. They were wearing the Conquer COVID t-shirts that Haley Wickenheiser and her team were putting out there to raise awareness in early days of this pandemic. What is it that changes somebody from Conquer COVID t-shirts to, if you are vaccinated, you're what's wrong in the world, and how dangerous that is?
Well, there's been some really interesting research that talks about how COVID was an entry point into conspiracy theories, right? So, you start believing, and everyone's afraid, everyone's anxious. There might even be reasons for individuals to be frustrated with our institutions. I totally get that. But that sort of invites people to start considering conspiracy theories, right? And the door is open, right? So then you walk in and you start meeting other individuals that are thinking the same way, that have the same concerns as you, and all of a sudden you're believing conspiracy theories. And there's really interesting work that talks about, one conspiracy theory is every conspiracy theory. Once you start to believe one conspiracy theory, all of a sudden you're believing, that 5G caused the pandemic, that the World Economic Forum has a grand plan for us all. It all becomes one big conspiracy theory. And the other thing I want to point out, that quote from Fleury about, he's the smartest. There's also research on that, and pretty consistently, you guys, studies have shown that individuals that believe conspiracy theories actually know the least about the topic. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, and we have a growing body of evidence on this. So let me be really clear about this. What they have found, and they do studies on this, they test it. those who have the strongest views on the topic against the topic often know the least about the topic, and wait for it, and think they know the most, which is basically summarized in his tweet, right? So
Right.
I think that, it gives you some sense of how we got here with these two.
Do you think there's also the idea that there's always kind of a little kernel of truth at the beginning of every conspiracy theory, and they build on it, and the waves go out and out and out until it, doesn't even make sense anymore and doesn't reflect reality. But when someone else starts to research, they say, "Oh, well, that makes sense, so therefore this must be true," and off they go.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Let's just pick a couple examples, right? Look, big pharma, they haven't been great actors all the time. It's
Right.
like in fact, we've even researched that at our institute, the impact of commercial interests on research, the impact of big pharma on the production of data. They haven't always been good actors, right? So that's a truth, right? Early days in the pandemic, public health agencies did not do a great job communicating the science, right? And that was a mistake. Sure, I think everyone learned, and that's tried to get better, and mistakes continue to be made, but that was true, right? And that helps to legitimize other things that are completely off the rails, right? And I see it daily. I absolutely see it daily, where people will refer to these kernels of truth, right? And often they're from a different context to
Right.
justify and legitimize their conspiracy theory, which has absolutely nothing to do with reality. And I think it's worth highlighting some of these kind of conspiracy theories, the died suddenly thing, the idea that vaccines are killing hundreds of people or thousands, really tens of thousands. No evidence to support that at all. Lots of empirical evidence that says the opposite, that the vaccines have microchips in them. No, they don't, right? That the vaccines are causing infertility. No, they're not. And we have good empirical evidence to refute all those kinds of claims.
Now, when you talk about those claims like the sudden death piece, and if an athlete died, anything, people will grab onto some of these headlines and then point to it, and then as Linda says, it goes down the waves and the echoes from that. But it starts somewhere. Can you talk a bit about how anti-vax, anti-science disinformation is big business?
It is big business, and I think that's often forgotten. We were talking about how big pharma that have been bad actors in the past, and there are these conflicts of interest. They exist, but people often forget that the other side of the equation, those who are pushing the misinformation, are also profiting from this. They are selling products like supplements. They are selling therapeutics like the unproven ivermectin. They're also creating brands. And you can think of an individual like Kennedy, Mercola, who sells supplements, et cetera. They've built big industries based on the ideas that are foundational to the anti-vax movement. So we can't forget that. And the other thing is, unfortunately, the social media platforms also have,
Right.
their algorithms, the way the incentives built into social media platforms also benefit from this kind of polarized discourse, right? And that is also it's also fueling the spread of misinformation. And once you become part of those echo chambers, you guys, it can be very, very difficult to see across the void to the other side.
And I don't think it's a coincidence that these two people, Jamie Salé and Theo Fleury, are both from Alberta, because there is a connection between your political ideology and whether you are prone to be a conspiracy theorist.
You're right, and I want to be really careful here
I know.
because look, misinformation is spread across the ideological spectrum. There's just no doubt about it, right? I mean, you look at GMO misinformation that largely has resided on the left. It's starting to migrate a little bit. And historically, if you go back in time, I think around Woodstock, et cetera, right? A lot of the distrust of science at that time in the 60s and early 70s resided on the left. But in this cultural moment right now, a lot of it is emanating from the right. And there's just no doubt about it. There's a lot of studies, a lot of well done empirical studies that have shown that. Especially in the context of COVID. And again, we have robust evidence that supports this, that a lot of it is on on the right. And then once misinformation becomes part of your ideological position, it becomes part of your identity, it can be much more difficult to change people's minds. And there's just no doubt that that's what's happening here, not only in Alberta, but with these two individuals.
And you spend a great deal of your time pushing back and telling truths and fighting for science, fighting for facts, putting science up front, if you will, up first. Is it worth it for all of us to do that? Like you say, it's very difficult to pull somebody back from their fear-rooted anti-science position. Is it necessary that we all continue to fight for facts and truth?
Yes, absolutely it is. It is exhausting, and it can feel like you're just, holding back the ocean, right? The tide is coming and you're using a little bucket. But that's the reality is, once again, I've said this phrase a couple of times here, there is a body of evidence that tells us this works, right? It really does make a difference to counter misinformation on social media, to do pre-bunking and debunking, and to teach critical thinking skills. And yes, to use some regulatory tools too. We have to come at this from every direction. And there have been a number of, I think well-done studies that have shown that if you do that, you really can make a difference. What I always say is, look, if we didn't do this, it's bad now, right? It's bad now.
Yeah.
Imagine what it would be like if no one fought the bunk, right?
Just before I let you go,
we would be right now.
Just before I let you go, very quickly, you have paid a personal price for being the king of debunking.
Yes.
I have, but look, everyone who does this is under a lot of pressure. There's the hate mail, and there are the threats, and there's the constant harassment. Yeah. But the good news is, you guys, there is an amazing science communication team here in Canada that, they've always got our back. It's a fantastic, warm, smart, clever, creative community. A lot of brains younger than this brain out there doing really creative, fun stuff on TikTok, on Instagram, on Twitter, they're really everywhere. So that's the good news, is we're seeing more and more diverse voices getting into this battle.
Thank you. Were you doing the same thing?
Same exact thing at the same time.
So much
we appreciate you
for what you're doing, Professor Timothy Caulfield. Thanks so much.
All right, stay tuned. You got to stay tuned, especially for tonight's What the Hell is Wrong with People, because this one has the Canadian dairy lobby in the crosshairs.
Yeah, and still ahead, Valentine's Day is almost here, so we're talking May-December romances. How big of a gap is too big? That's next.